Next, the Frenchman charged with drugging, raping and recruiting at least 50 strangers to rape his own wife has admitted his crimes. In a Paris courtroom, 71-year-old Dominique Pelicot begged forgiveness of his family. He said, "I'm a rapist like the others in this room." His now ex-wife has waived anonymity to ensure public shaming of all her attackers.
Flanked by her lawyers, Gisèle Pelicot arrives at court. The 72-year-old attending trial as her husband takes the stand following delays due to issues with his health. On Tuesday, Dominique Pelicot admitted to the charges against him in their entirety, adding he was a rapist like all the others in the room. He asked his wife, children and grandchildren to accept his apologies. The 71-year-old said he regretted what he did, asked for forgiveness while acknowledging his actions were unforgivable. Dominique Pelicot is standing trial alongside 50 other men between the ages of 26 and 73. He's accused of orchestrating the rape of his wife by strangers after drugging her over the span of 9 years. Some of the defendants said they believe Gisèle Pelicot was pretending to be asleep and had in fact consented to sex, although that assertion is likely disputed after Tuesday's testimony. Dominique Pelicot's lawyer, meanwhile, says more details about her client will emerge.
He was raped at the Châteauroux Hospital when he was 9 years old. He was present at a gang rape where others wanted him to participate when he was 14 years old. And he witnessed some scenes of sexual violence between his parents that he shouldn't have seen because a 14-year-old kid mustn't see that kind of thing.
While Dominique Pelicot's testimony is expected to continue, his wife has already become a symbol of the struggle against sexual violence in France. Over the weekend, hundreds took to the streets across French cities in solidarity with Gisèle Pelicot.
Delano de Souza there. Let's stay with this story and get more analysis. We're joined from Carleton University in Canada by Dr Ummni Khan, a specialist on the socio-legal construction of deviant sexuality with a focus on kink, sex work and representations of hardcore eroticism. Thank you for being with us. And I'm interested to hear what you've got to think about this case. Looking at the case as a layman, I just find it sick. What is your take on what we're seeing happening, playing out in the court now?
I mean, it's very shocking because it's so extreme, and yet it's not shocking because there's a history of men, that is husbands, own their wives. And so before the law changed, for example, marital rape wasn't a crime. And so this idea that a man would have a right to have sex with his wife whenever she wanted to, and even lend her out the way he would lend a car because he owns her in essence as her wife, that is part of the history, I think, that is the ideology underneath this horrible crime.
Yeah, I'm totally shocked by the whole thing, and I can't buy into anything you've just said at all. I'm not doubting what you're saying, Doctor. I'm not doubting what you're saying, but yes, the whole thing seems repugnant to me. The defence tried to use the argument that the husband wasn't raping the wife, i.e. you can't rape within marriage. I mean, clearly that is almost Stone Age thinking, isn't it?
Well, I wish it was Stone Age, but the law changed in the 80s and 90s in Canada and France. So it's really not that long ago. And I think the problem is that even though the law changes, people still have that in their mind. And then you have the myth of, well, if she didn't say no, if she didn't, resist, then it's fine. She was unconscious. He says it wasn't as traumatic because she's not conscious for the assaults. So I feel like there's a lot of self-serving myths that perpetrators tell themselves, which make it seem justifiable what they do.
Indeed, and that brings us to those who took part, because clearly Mr. Pelicot has done this for his own gratification, whatever that might be. I can't begin to comprehend. But there have been other men who came and took part in this, and some say they didn't know, but the chances are they did know what was going on. That's conjecture from my part. But what would motivate someone to get involved in this kind of grubbery, this kind of horrific crime?
Yeah, that's a great question. The men who engaged seem to look to the husband as the person to give consent. So they get their vicarious consent through the husband. And then I think that there is a kind of pleasure in this group activity. I think it's a part of the interaction, the secrecy, and the unconsciousness becomes part of the kind of perverse pleasure that they're getting from these attacks.
I can't imagine what kind of excuses psychologically they're going to come up with as to why they were compelled to do what they did. And we've heard a little from the lawyer of Dominique Pelicot, the 71-year-old who's now admitted being a rapist, that admitted what he's done. And he's gone on his hands and knees almost asking for forgiveness. A bit late, some might say. The lawyer making excuses as to why he might have turned out like this. But the fact is that no matter what happens to a person, you still have a choice to make. And he chose to do this. I think people just can't understand that he chose to do what he did.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's, you're asking a question about human nature, right? He's saying, I wasn't born this way. It's because of trauma. He uses the word addiction to talk about his behavior. So he's trying to frame his behavior within the discourse of mental health and post-traumatic. But most of us believe, actually, despite all of that, many people have trauma. They make a choice to, get better or do something else. And so, it's kind of the mystery of kind of human psychology is, does he make this choice, or is he just this product of this, terrible childhood experiences, allegedly, that his lawyers want us to believe? And I think it's a bit hard for people to swallow that, as for you and for many of us. At the end of the day, he's saying sorry after he got caught.
The victim has been incredibly brave in waiving anonymity in order to kind of put the shame onto those who committed the offences, which is an incredibly brave thing for her to do.
Oh, it's so brave, and people don't realize how new that is, right? Before, if a woman got raped, it was her fault. She must have done something, right? Or she's exaggerating, or she secretly enjoyed it, right? Which is all the excuses, all the rape myths that people try to perpetuate. And the idea that a victim should be shamed, right? That is the patriarchal ideology from the past. And she is so bravely showing her face. And really, she has become a symbol for the world, not just France, in shifting that shame onto the perpetrators.
People do different things to get their gratification. The key issue is, of course, it has to be with consent among consenting adults, and people need to agree what happens. None of that was happening, what was taking place in southern France.
That's right. And I think it's important for people to remember, sex games that are consensual, where you get the direct consent from all of the parties, is wonderful. And people will consent to fantasies that would involve pretend force or pretend non-consent. And there's nothing wrong with that. But that is not at all what was happening here. This is an assault with zero consent. And in fact, it can have even worse, because he was gaslighting her. She was, waking up with these symptoms of these major health problems. And he's, not telling her the real reason is because she's being continually assaulted. And so I really think it's important to kind of separate consensual sexual interactions that can be alternative versus what's happening here, which is a clear violation of her bodily autonomy.
Dr. Ummni Khan, there are so many other questions I'd like to ask you, but sadly time has run out. Thank you for your time with us here and sharing your analysis of what is an absolutely horrific case. And of course, that case continues at a court in Paris. Dr. Ummni Khan of Carleton University, specialist on the socio-legal construction of deviant sexuality. Thank you for joining us and sharing your time with us.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And as I say, the case continues here in Paris. Next.